Hello, I'm Honey Novick, and I want to welcome you to the second episode of our wonderful podcast, How Does It Feel? This week, I thought we would talk about the work of the amazing Canadian performance art group General Idea. General Idea was formed in Toronto, I'm going to say over 50 years ago. It's a historically important art group. But I have to tell you the backstory. The backstory is, once upon a time, there was a high school dropout looking for a job. Her teacher, her favorite teacher, recommended that she go to a theater and be a coat check girl, which she knew she could do. Well, lo and behold, she gets the job as the coat check girl for the former Toronto Workshop Productions Theatre in downtown Toronto. And who does she meet but the wonderful Mimi Page of Winnipeg, who had graduated from the University of Manitoba and then came to Toronto to live in the revolutionary Rochdale College, the coat check place at Toronto Workshop Productions, where I met and became lifelong friends with my wonderful friend Mimi Page. And this, everybody who's watching this, is Mimi Page.
Honey, what a wonderful welcoming. Honey, I want to talk about General Idea, Better Together. I'm going to get a bit of history where we all came from, and the fact that you and I are friends for, all this time, it really says that we are better together. Here's something very important we keep forgetting to mention. For you, it started with Salminio.
Yes, it did.
Hawaii, yeah.
So for people who watch this, they will know.
Yeah,
they
sure.
will know about
Salminio.
Yes, Salminio was in Rebel Without a Cause.
I should be her historian.
And when Mimi and I met at the theater, the reason that she became my friend was because I mentioned that I had just come back from California on an invitation from Salminio, the actor.
Family.
Oh, yeah. So when Mimi heard that I was invited to California by a legitimate Hollywood movie star, that cemented our friendship.
Yes, but she brought Hollywood into General Idea. That's what
that's what they keep telling me. So did you.
Yes.
I don't get it myself. Like I've been referred to as Elizabeth Taylor, and I'm thinking, where? The color of my hair? That's the only thing I see, but people have said that. And I'm going, okay. Or a kind of glamour. I look at myself and see the most casual person, and people say it's glamorous. Fine. I'll take whatever I can get as long as it's complimentary.
Right.
But yes, so our friendship basically started from a conversation on the fact that Hollywood is in my, I guess, DNA.
Yes. And that's how we became performance artists. My interest in performance, I think, started way back when first I took ballet, and then when I was 14, it turned into skating. And coming from a Catholic background, we had processions at church, and then on the street, we did processions. So the whole neighborhood would get together, and the kids would take wagons, and we'd go down the street. And I think that was the beginning of my interest in this kind of thing. In university, I took interior design, and then in my third year, I switched to fine arts. And in fine arts, I did a year where I studied under a Brecht scholar. And that, again, was introduced happenings and all this kind of theaterish things. And while at the university, I got the highest average, the gold medal, and could have gone on to be an artist on my own, as we all could have. But when we all joined together, it was something else. And so it started with everybody coming in. Ron could have been an artist on his own. My professor said, of me, you're a good artist on your own. You don't need them. Oh, yeah, but together we were so much better. Ron was an artist on his own. AA was starting to do things. Jorge came from Dalhousie. and Honey came from the conservatory.
Yes, I did. The Royal Conservatory of Music.
So everybody
Always the odd person out.
We all had our little niche. And so together we did different things. And in the performances, Honey and I, this is me with my bear costume on, and this is the bear costume. And Honey had came with a fur fox on. You remember? Well, we don't want to say. We better say imitation.
No,
fox.
it was real fox.
Oh, don't say that.
It
Honey.
was.
And Honey, are you going to show a picture of mine with your fox? Anyway, that was one of the performances, and I think in the beginning, GI was very performance based.
Yes. I'd like to go a little bit further back.
Yeah, please.
So I've always been a kind of, I don't know what you call it, a space case or something. When we became friends,
Right.
I was so fascinated by your lifestyle that you would move into this brand new building and you would attract all these people. So when Mimi mentions AA,
Right.
AA was Michael Timms, he still
Right.
is,
Yes.
of the art department at the University of Manitoba and
He was in architecture.
architecture.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to really impress is that eventually you and the guys moved out of Rochdale into a house,
Right.
and then out of the house and into a studio on Yonge Street. I don't think it's there. It may very well be, but it was huge. And the table, the kitchen table where everybody ate, this was like communal eating. I'd never seen anything like that before, where people just dropped in, and I was hungry, so I was happy to be there.
Jorge was the cook.
Oh my goodness. And I remember you and I talking about the fact that, we were fascinated by beauty pageants.
Oh.
And the theme or the idea, the kernel, I don't mean Colonel like Colonel Sanders,
No.
I mean kernel as in popcorn. The kernel for this idea, this seed, came about from a conversation that Mimi and I had at the big table, and that turned into a kind of satire of beauty pageants, where Mimi and I got to be dressed up in my real fox fur. It wasn't a faux fox fur. I can thank my mother for that and her sense of style. We used it in theater. You had your Catholic processions. I had these galas. Anyway,
That's right. It all contributed.
yes, so that's what I wore. We did our first major performance that I remember at the St. Lawrence Center for the Arts, and Mimi was dressed as a bear, and those were my contestants. Was all these bears, and I had to play a teletype machine.
Right.
But it was a commentary on the pageants in general, and slowly, from doing it, I began to awaken to how theater and the arts were used as social commentary. It took me a long time because, for one thing, I was friends with Mimi, but I wasn't really friends with anybody else. And I was, I'm not as outspoken. I wasn't then as I am now. It was a different person. And to awaken to this marvelous concept of using theater as a form of activism,
Right.
political statements, it was genuinely an awakening.
To go back a bit, for me, my entrance into the beauty pageants was in university. There were always queens, and I got nominated for every queen there was: engineering queen, snow queen, interfraternity queen, all the queens, but I never won. Never. And I think Ron, I remember when he came in and told me that I was Miss General ID, I said, "You don't have to do this." And he said, "No, we want to do it." But I felt like he gave me a contest I could, at least get a miss in front of my name with. I didn't know it would last that long. But and when we were in university, AA can attest to this. It was Beaux-Arts, because architecture at that time and design and fine arts, Beaux-Arts was a big thing.
Well, my train, I think I've lost my train. Or as Bob Dylan says, I'm riding on a mail train.
One interesting thing which is never mentioned about you, at that time too, you were involved in the Native people, right?
Yes.
Weren't you babysitting for Duke Redbird?
Yes.
Okay,
that's interesting that you would
yes.
remember that. So because of my music background, I guess around that time I was studying privately, maybe with Lee Klein, who I'm still in contact with. He is a guitar teacher. He's a master guitarist. And he suggested that I volunteer at the Mariposa Folk Festival. And so because I respected him, I said that I'd like to volunteer. And they put me in what was called the Native section. It would never happen today, that kind of, division. But at that time, I was placed in the Native section, and it was another kind of awakening. This was like more like being shaken awake, whereas the other one with General Idea was being slowly awakening. So anyway, at Mariposa, one day, it was on Toronto Island, I think, at the time, and I was just walking around our section, the Native section, and I saw on the ground a flyer advertising Ojibwe lessons. And as a music student, I had to sing in German, Italian, French, and I thought, why not Ojibwe? So I picked up the flyer. It didn't cost anything. Lo and behold, the building was just up the street from where I was living at the time. It was funded by, and this is also defunct, the Ontario Métis and Non-Status Indian Association. So anyway, I went, and I don't know what it was about me, somehow all along the way, including to this day, there's always been some kind of like an angel or some kind of force or something.
That's
some
the spirit. General Idea.
And
like here's to the spirit, right?
Here's to the spirit. Yes.
Spirit.
So the director at the time, eventually, because I was a good student, I showed up every lesson. I can't tell you what the lessons were, but I did show up. And the director, Jim Law, one day he crooked his finger and he said, come into my office. And I went, okay. And he said, somebody said you like country and Western music. I said, yes, I do. And he said, what do you know? I said, Hank Williams. So he pulls out his guitar and we start playing Hank Williams on the job. And it was great. So then with the help of the, I think the wonderful Pierre Trudeau's LIP grants,
yes,
labor initiative projects, I got hired on paper as a secretary, but my job was to go and sing on reserves for the children and eventually in prisons for the men. And I did that. And then because of my connection with General Idea and observation that theater could be used as activism, through that, I borrowed her deerskin outfit. There was a picture in the newspaper, and I went to this cowboy show, and there was all kinds of newspapers and television, and they were bringing, this cowboy was riding a horse on Queen Street West, and I showed up in this Native Indian thing. And I just, even without saying a word, I knew from General Idea, just my presence alone would make it so that people could see that there was more to this than meets the eye, and I could use theater as a form of activism.
Very good, very good. in General Idea, they publicized in various different ways. And one of the ways that they got the message across and the story across was through File magazine.
Yes.
And File, we didn't bring a file here because it's very valuable.
Show this.
Oh, right. This is also.
I don't know if the camera can
maybe
see
AA
this.
Would be better to speak on it.
But maybe later. Oh, there we are. So you can see the masthead. So they actually took it right from Life magazine and were sued. We got a cease and desist letter. But it was wonderful. I mean, we kept doing those kinds of things. I mean, I did it with poetry with Tennessee Williams and got a cease and desist because I wanted to put music to his poetry and was told no. I did it with Pete Seeger and he gave me a contract. Oh.
AA almost landed us in jail.
I know.
AA did a piece for Futz. There was a play here, what I call Futz, and he put real meat into a big plastic container and he got in with pockets and he got me to help him. And before we knew it, the play got busted and we had to go to court. So thank you, AA, for that. But AA's been so good to us all our life and such a beautiful being.
But you have to be prepared, I think, to really take chances if you want to do anything important in life.
Well, the thing was, if I had taken more chances, it would have been different. But for me, at the point of graduating, I was already looking for a health plan and thinking about of having a steady income. I could only take risks so far. So I ended up at the museum in Winnipeg and Ottawa, and then at the CBC in Toronto, where I'm recently had spent 20 years of. I've had shows at the beginning at Plug-In, where I started with my shows, and then it ended up, my last show was Art Metropole, and I have been given a camera by Olympia to do some photos for them. The photos I do are not photos. They're more, I use them for documentation. I'm not a photographer, but I tell stories with the pictures. And when we did these performances, we never split up the audience. There was something for everybody in there. So I just want to say all together, we've mentioned all the people. We've mentioned AA, which is Michael Timms. We've mentioned Ron Gabe, Felix Parts. We've mentioned Jorge Horizontal. We mentioned you. And, we have Granada. Granada was a big part of General Idea, very stylistic. And she was a designer who did fashion shows on her own, but these were not the run-of-the-mill fashion show, right? She's a very creative person and did Glamazon, did she? Things like that. Very unusual. Very great, good thing. So that kind of puts us, another thing that GI did, which was a good idea, is nom de plumes. So they could have those names, but still have their own life as
Once upon a time, I wrote a poem called Once a Miss, Never a Myth. And that's Mimi and I. This is a friendship that has lasted longer than 50 years. I didn't expect it to be so. I had no idea. When we met as two coat check girls.
Exactly.
And then.
I thought she was after my job. This is during
No,
school,
I was after
right?
your clothes. But it was so fascinating. And then for a while, our paths diverged. She went one way, I went another. I got into music seriously to the point of performing at the Carnegie Recital Hall and then got seriously into poetry. Through General Idea, there was always this cord, this thread that kept us together. And now I'm so happy to say at this point in my life, where I'm now supposed to be considered like a senior citizen, well, forget that. I'm redefining it. I'm a sage. And that means that my energy is just as good as it was. It's different. I'm not ready to hop off to California at the drop of a hat like I used to be. We've done really important things, and to have a friend that really lifts you up.
We know each other. We knew where we came from. We knew Ron's brother and Ron's mother. We'd also go there. They knew us and we knew them. And honey, AA made a book for you and he sent you, you went to California.
I did.
When you know everything about the people, you know them right from the start, there's something wonderful can grow out of that. You trust them. I don't think we've ever been jealous of anybody. And now ending with this time of ours.
Wow, thank you. What a wonderful note to end on.
Yes, thank you, honey.
Yes.
Nice to be with you again.
You too.
I'm sure we'll be together with a coffee later.
And for me, what I want to say is that I'm so comforted knowing that this stage of my life is as exciting as the beginning. And I don't think it ever needs to change. It's like being a flower. You know, a flower, when it blossoms, has a different beauty than when it's in full bloom. So that's what I'm going to say. And I'm going to close this episode of How Does It Feel? And thank you for sticking with us. And I hope you found it interesting. And see you next time.